Welcome to the Programmatic Digest, a podcast dedicated to reviewing industry trends and latest news in the programmatic and ad tech world. I'm Ellen Parker, your host and Chief Programmatic Sensei of Ellen Parker Consulting, where we offer one-on-one coaching or a 6-month training and development program in programmatic media to fit you and your team's needs. So thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe right below and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Programmatic Digest podcast, everyone. And Frank are this week's guests. How are you doing today?
Good. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Frank Maguire is from Sharethrough, and he's going to talk to us about all things video, but not just pre-roll, y'all, because when we hear video, we think of pre-roll CTV, but everything from holistic view. We're really excited about today's conversation because we're not only going to talk about, the modern consumption behaviors from video consumption, but also what are the changing aspect and the changing spectrum of that industry. But before we get into today's conversation, Frank, I would really love it if you can introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and then what you do.
Perfect. So again, I'm Frank Maguire. I'm head of our insights and strategy at Sharethrough. So if you don't know Sharethrough, we're an SSP or ad exchange, whatever buzzword you want to use. I've been at Sharethrough for almost 11 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
I helped open our New York office about 11 years ago, but was agency side for 4 or 5 years before that.
Yeah.
So I've been in the digital ad space for a while. Never imagined I'd be here for 11 years, but it's honestly been a pretty amazing ride and lots of changes from a tiny startup to a much larger company now with grand plans for the future.
Yeah.
But I focus on, as I said, on our insights and strategy. So early days Sharethrough, we actually helped invent, even just the buzzword, even phrase into an industry of native advertising. This was 6 or 7 years ago. We helped actually define what native advertising was. We used to do these big native conferences, and we just do a lot of research around what's working, what's not with native advertising. We've since expanded that beyond just native, and we're an exchange for all ad types, banners and video and native, but kind of using that same mantra that helped us build native ads, that ads should fit in, not be interruptive. They should be better for the user experience, and think more about the user experience in the ads that we deliver. And we're trying to apply that to things even display ads. How can we make banner ads better for the user, and use research about consumer behaviors to improve those? But then also especially video. And I think there's been a lot that we've learned about video consumption behaviors that have impacted even the ways that we help serve video ads for customers, but trying to keep it as simple and as effective as possible for advertisers, that especially now by 90% of our ads through us programmatically, and how do we fit into those workflows but still improve the performance of ads by looking at the consumer first and figuring out ways that we can adapt even the way impressions delivered on the fly, so that there's a better chance that your advertiser message is actually going to be seen and comprehended.
Right. So I love the fact that you say you've been working for Sharethrough for 11 years. So let's really talk about your journey to where you are today. I know you started as a planner way back when, before Sharethrough. So talk to us about how you ended up in the industry, from planning to sales, market development, and to now insight and data, and strategy rather.
Yeah. Actually, the beginning is actually pretty funny, because I was in college. I went to Boston College, and I was an intern at the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
And I would sometimes mascot for both the Patriots and their soccer team, the Revolution. And so I would dress up in this 7-foot tall, either fox for the soccer team or the Patriot for non-game events. So I did boat shows and mall events, and I did some picture opportunities with the cheerleaders and stuff, which is pretty fun. But I was trying to decide if I wanted to stay in sports marketing, which was cool, but also there's so many people that want to do that, they don't necessarily have to treat you nicely to keep you in that position. Or I was starting to learn about this new thing called digital advertising, and actually went to a career fair in Boston where I met someone from Cara Fusion, actually at the time, which is now just called Cara, and learned about digital advertising. I was memorable to them because they're like, "Wait, you're the Patriot mascot?" So like, it was really easy for me to get interviews at the time because I had people remembered who I was because of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, in long story short, I chose digital advertising over mascotting or sports marketing. And I'm happy I did. But so I worked at Cara for a number of years on like Pfizer and Wyndham Hotel Group. Then went to Moxie, which became Zenith, working on Nestle and a number of accounts there. And actually, when I was on Nestle is when I met Sharethrough. At the time, the co-founder and CEO had recently dropped out of Stanford grad school to start the company. And he was a really interesting guy and just loved what they were talking about. And the company was very different back then, but I eventually convinced him to hire me in New York and help them kind of meet more people in New York and expand beyond the 10 people in San Francisco at the time. And it was really helpful having that insight of like what is the buyer and the agency side like, and having that empathy for what that role is. And it's really helped across my career from started in sales, but have really moved into more of marketing and research, and to understand the end consumer of both the actual consumer itself, but also the media buyer and what they're looking for and hoping for. And so trying to incorporate that into a lot of the ways that we both market our products, but also even the research that we do, just like, let's understand not just consumers, but also the buyers that are tasked with doing an insurmountable amount of work on a daily basis. And how do we improve their lives as well is a big piece of it.
So if you had to recap your day-to-day now in 3 words, emphasis on things that are exciting in your day-to-day, what would that be?
3 words. I guess consumer behavior research is what I'm most excited about. We're doing a lot of research around just like consumer consumption behaviors. We were lately focusing a lot on video consumption behaviors, and especially with the explosion of CTV. What can CTV improve that TV wasn't able to do, and really trying to dig more into that world. I think there's still a lot to be solved in that. It's a buzzword, and rightfully so. Everyone's cutting their cord and everything, but there's still a huge attention problem with TV. Like, people still mostly don't pay attention to TV ads, even if it's CTV. And how do we get that attention back onto the TV? And those are the types of things that I'm researching and tackling, and excited to try to turn that research into real products that could hopefully improve both the consumer experience, but then also the effectiveness of ads.
So that's a good segue into what we were going to talk about today: consumer behavior. How can advertisers and media buyers adapt their video campaigns to fit the modern consumption behaviors, with an emphasis on what is the modern consumption behavior at the moment?
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest change that's happened, probably even especially in the last 5 years, is and this is one of the big things that came out of our most recent research, is that most people now are watching video on mute. And that really started with the growth of
I'm one of those people too. I'm so sorry. I acted surprised, but like, I 70% of the time it's on mute.
Yeah. And we've become so used to it too that even now when I'm in a place where I could turn the sound on, for some reason I just don't, and I still just end up reading the captions.
Yeah.
Or you're ever in that case where you're scrolling through content, or Instagram or anywhere else, and
Instagram particularly,
you're watched a whole video on mute that didn't have captions, and you're like, how did I just watch that? I have no idea what just happened, but I still watched the whole thing somehow. I was talking about this with someone. They said that how you can save a video on Instagram into a folder. And she was she's like, I save videos into a folder called listen later with sound on. But yet I've never actually gone into that folder and watched them again. But I have them there in case one day I feel like it. But those are the types of things that we've it's not just on Instagram. It's every site now is designed in an infinite feed of content, and so videos start on mute. And I think advertisers sometimes lose track of that. What is the end consumer what is their experience in the way that you're serving their ad? And I think you can apply that to any of your ads, whether it's a banner ad, if it's a video ad. If it's a video ad, where is it going to be played? Is it pre-roll? Is it outstream? Is it social? Is it feed? Is it, where is it going to be run? And then put yourself in that consumer's shoes. And there's just little things like adding captions to a video can go a long way into improving the effectiveness of it. Especially, I think our research showed that the exact number is like 75% of people mostly watch videos on mute on their phone, but even on computers, it's like 62% of some age groups are still keep their computer on mute when the video plays. And so something as simple as either telling your creative agency to add captions on videos, which we've been kind of banging that gong for a number of years and trying to talk to both creative teams and media teams to hey, get them to add more, like even just add captions goes a long way. And it's so hard sometimes, that disconnect between media and creative, because they're usually two different agencies and it's a whole process. So we were finally like, you know what, screw it, we'll do it ourselves. So we built a product that like automatically adds captions to videos, because like what we found is like you can do it on Instagram, you can do it on TikTok, you can do it on YouTube pretty easily, just check a button. But on the rest of the internet, you can't really do that on the open web. There's not like an easy checkbox to do that. So we've started doing it automatically, and then in true kind of Sharethrough fashion, instead of just like embedding captions into a video, we referenced this eye tracking study we did a number of years ago that showed that the first place people's eyes go when they're scrolling through content is they look at the headline space first. So we were like, what if we had the captions animate in the headline space? And we use our technology that helps the fonts even match the fonts of the rest of the page, so the caption actually kind of fits in better. And by doing that, we saw a huge improvement in even just people's general comprehension for a video. Like we were testing, videos with and without captions, and could you even remember what you saw a second later? And just by adding those captions, people were, I think it was like 56% more likely to like even remember the message itself. And they were like, I forget the exact stat, but it was, I think, close to 60% higher, like even brand awareness, because they're like reading the words while they're watching the video, instead of like trying to watch a video on mute that they eventually just scroll past anyway.
What are like some consumption habits that have, okay, let me rephrase this. So the most surprising one to me at the moment would be the caption, like watching a video on mute. Before that, what would be a couple behaviors that maybe you've discovered, and it doesn't have to be recently, it could have been like, oh, we did a research 2-3 years ago, and back then this was it. Now watching a video on mute is it. So can you share from previous research how behaviors have changed to now?
Yeah, I guess it's actually kind of related to captions. I think because of our mobile video behaviors are impacting the way we watch TV now. And so like if you had asked, 5 years ago, like, how often do you watch TV with captions on? Like almost no one would, unless you were like, hard of hearing, or, you were learning a different language or something like that. There were just like, only a few people would really do it. And now it's like over 50, I think it's like 55% of most people now pretty much always watch TV with captions on, which is, I think, alone kind of an amazing stat. And, since we've been like talking to clients about this, it comes out to about 50% that like always keep them on. And ever since we've done this research, like I used to only put captions on when I watched like Game of Thrones or something, where I didn't want to like miss a single word, and like maybe the accents were heavy, you didn't want to miss something. Or like I've heard people say like Peaky Blinders was like a big one where like you can't understand a word anyway, so you need captions. But since I've done it, I'm now like addicted to it, and like I can't watch TV without captions now. And you realize how much stuff you might have missed. Even little things, like it'll say like that if there's a song playing, it says who the artist is. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I'm totally addicted.
So I also watch TV with captions, but it's been years. But English is my second language. So my native language is French. And so adapting to the American culture and adapting to English here versus the English we taught in books back home, just being able to read and hear the words and the pronunciation was very helpful. So I've always had captions. As a matter of fact, whenever we go to movies, like in the movie theater pre-pandemic, of course, I always ask my husband, like, yo, turn on the captions for me. And he'll laugh like, no, babe, we can't do this here. Like, you're gonna have to. And but like once in a while, I'll ask him like, I did not follow this conversation. What is it? He's like, remember, I'll tell you after the movies because he hates people that talk for the movies. Like, I'm one of the people. Don't invite me, okay? If you want to be like my husband, styling deep into the movie, don't invite me. Don't invite me. You keep saying like I invite you because you're cute. I'm like, thanks, but like you know what's gonna happen at this point. But
I feel like that's probably like a common problem in households these days. I stay more so on the couch too, because this is actually something else that came out of the research, is that I think it was like 79% of people take out their phone when a commercial plays, not surprisingly, which is part of the attention problem you're talking about. But also, like, the part we didn't ask is like, and then do you put it away as soon as the TV show comes back on, or do you like forget and then you're 5 minutes in, you're like, oh wait, can you rewind? I forgot what happened.
yes,
Who just died? Who's that person?
yes.
Like, that's been an argument in my house a lot. Like, well, put your phone down and you would have seen what happened.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is terrible. But anyway, so what were we talking about before the
Captions.
captions? How we move from okay, so the 79% is a very interesting stats, but I'm not surprised about it. I'm not surprised about it. I think that's why cross-device targeting or cross-device strategies have been so successful. And I'm speaking from a media buying perspective or from like a omni-channel strategy perspective. That's why cross-device has been so key. So talk about so when I reached out to you, well, when we came across and we met at the Programmatic IO in New York this last quarter, we talked about third wave of video and the prediction for fourth wave of video. So what exactly is a third wave of video?
Yeah. So actually, as part of this research and kind of your question before about like how have behaviors changed, we kind of realized there were like these three distinct moments in like the history of video where behaviors changed a lot. And like the first thing we did was think of like what are the main like expected behaviors for an advertiser or even just a content creator when someone's watching a video. And generally, you expect someone's going to be watching it with their eyes open, listening with the sound on, and paying mostly full attention on the video. And up until early 21st century, that was mostly true, right? You were like, the sound was on, your attention was on the TV, and you were watching it without much other distractions going on, like other screens. Obviously, the growth of mobile and those types of things helped pull attention, but it was really the growth of YouTube in like 2006 or so when it really exploded that like started diverting attention. So you had multiple screens. Maybe you're watching your laptop while watching TV. Sometimes sound wasn't on one of those. So like each of those behaviors started decreasing a little bit, and that's where we really saw that first significant jump in like attention decreased, sound on decreased, and even just like watching one screen versus the other decreased. And then it was really the growth of obviously smartphones in general, but really the growth of social channels and introducing the infinite feed of content that really led to this like what we call this third wave of video that really happened with the explosion of infinite feeds of content, where each of those stats even decrease even more. We're paying less attention to videos, especially even on our TV because our phone is out. Sound was on way less, as I was just talking about. And because you have multiple screens open, you're just maybe not watching one versus the other. And so those three behaviors all decreased, but then this like fourth behavior came out of nowhere, which is reading, and how like now you have to like almost read a video to make sense of it because sound is off and you need captions to make sense of it. And we even need to read TV shows to make sense of them now since everyone's using captions. So this like fourth behavior has been introduced in what we call this like third wave of video that we're in right now. We're already starting to like predict, all right, then what is the fourth wave going to be and how are our behaviors going to change again? And our assumption is it's going to be driven by virtual reality or augmented reality or something like that, where that's going to have another drastic change when more people are actually using virtual reality to watch content. But we think like the maybe the gist of what that fourth wave is going to be about, though, is more about co-presence. And like right now, like you kind of like sit at home alone maybe and scroll through your feeds of content. It's kind of sad you're by yourself. But in the future, you might be in virtual reality where your friend is, or your friends are virtually next to you in a room, and you're all watching the same content together, whether it's your TikTok stories or latest Netflix show. But you're actually like co-present together, kind of the same, kind of the way that's happening in the gaming community now, where like most games now, you're in the community of other people. Sometimes you know the people, sometimes you don't. But anyway, I think that's what the metaverse and Web3 and all those buzzwords are really setting us up for, is this fourth wave of where co-presence becomes a greater part to how we watch video. And I think the bigger question is going to be, what does that mean for advertisers? And I don't think we know a lot of that, but I think there's some really interesting things happening that for me, I'm really excited to start studying and learning more about. And it's kind of the Wild West right now.
That's cool. That makes me think about, I just finished reading the book Limitless from Jim Quick. And in the book, it teaches you how to use your brain the best way it should be used, and retaining information and developing your brain cells. And he talks about multitasking and about the hearing specifically. And that when we were kids, we were taught we were not taught how to listen properly. Like we would say, oh, listen with your ears, when in reality, the body and the brain does not consume just with one sense. Like you have the touch, you have the taste, you have the listen, the smell, whatever. And it's just saying that if you add on all of those senses, you're able to retain the information beyond the 24 hours that most average people retain and do not continue retaining above that time. But it's like he said, you have to listen with your eyes, which the caption ends. You have to listen with your ears, and that's because like we're visual people, and some learns better listening, touching and stuff, but ultimately you are visual to some extent. And then he brings in that empathy, that emotions into it, in terms of like listening with your heart. Like you, as human beings, we can't really see you touch, right? So we need to listen with all of our senses. And then when you start listening with like your heart, for instance, you start anticipating, you start develop like showing more empathy towards their listener, really being present. And that shows the other person how involved you are and how invested you are. So all of those research that you're doing through I just find it really interesting because of what I just read in terms of how to really communicate from like a really human to human base. And so going back to, and then this will be maybe the final question before we go into closing, but how do you retain that attention at this point? Like what can buyers or creative, you mentioned creative earlier, can learn from your research and implement? I'm a big execution person. Like what can they execute on today?
I think from a creative standpoint, I would assume that the big percentage of any audience is probably going to watch your video on mute. So think about, will this make sense on mute? Can you add, like, a lot of times we'd say, like, look at some of the best content creators on some of the social channels, and like they all add big bold words, their TikTok videos or Instagram, and it's not just captions, they kind of highlight big things. So that's one big thing you can do from an advertiser standpoint. But obviously, I think from a buyer standpoint, you almost like, like I was saying before, like put yourself in the consumer's shoes, and how is this going to make sense to them? And if it's something as simple as just adding captions to videos, can go a really long way. But even for like TV, that's what what we took from our last research was that number that like 79% of people are looking at their phones when a commercial is running, and it's like, wow, we really have this like big attention problem with TV. And so we're trying to do our own consumer research on like what can pull their attention back. And we're looking at everything from like QR codes to, are there sounds that aren't annoying that could also bring attention back to the TV? And maybe there's some eye tracking studies we can do. But we're trying to do things that are turnkey then for advertisers, so that they don't have to do the same thing, kind of go back and forth with their creative team, and something that just can be like easily implemented with like, anytime you buy videos on Sharethrough, is going to include these enhancements that are going to help pull back in attention, or even just depending on what type of creative it is, maybe it pulls different attention. We're even looking at things that like maybe even like something that pulls someone's attention before your ad runs, like a quiz or something interactive,
Yeah.
that makes someone look up from their phone on their TV and pay more attention. Early results from our research show that like people are more likely to pay attention to ads if they actually like are relevant to them. Not surprisingly, but that's why like CTV has so much promise. That like there's promise of targeting with CTV, but we're still as an industry kind of like trying to piece together all the things that we can and can't do versus digital, and with obviously with um, regulations and everything with targeting. So I think that's going to be a huge piece of it, between like targeting the right person and finding enhancement ways to like pull the person's attention back onto your ad.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing for everyone to think about too. Like as you're put yourself again in the consumer shoes and think about, will they pay attention to this, and will they even be able to like comprehend our message if it's if sound is off, or if they're slightly their attention is elsewhere, and like what are the things that you can pull that back.
And well, that's a good way to end this segment. So thank you for sharing. We really appreciate it, because I don't think there is enough emphasis on audience research, or at least not clearly, without incentive, I guess, for whoever needs audience. I think what Sharethrough is trying to do is really understand how people are consuming, and I think that's great. I think it brings a value to our industry. And now, what is one thing you can help me and the listener demystify about the whole programmatic industry? Like one thing that you think, oh, you know what? We keep hearing this, but actually we found out that this, aside from audience, maybe, is there anything else you can share with us?
Yeah. I think a lot of these are specifically relevant to how I work with Sharethrough, but I think
Oh, that's fine.
we've
Yeah.
we've really taken that concept of like, I think native ads took off for a reason, because like when ads fit in, they perform better, they're less interruptive. That's why Facebook and Twitter and everyone have done well from their ad products, because they didn't think about like interrupting their audience. They thought about how to like fit in and kind of earn attention. And I think the perception is that, yeah, but that takes a lot of extra time to come up with custom ideas and like custom creatives to run native ads. And I think a lot of brands have really figured that out, though, that it's on one hand, just native or simple assets like a thumbnail and a headline, pretty simple things to piece together. And they've become a part of most like the creative specs of any campaign now, which is great. But it can also still be applied towards banners. Even like that's one thing we've done is we want to make it as easy as possible for advertisers that target Sharethrough to improve their banners, because we'll add a headline automatically to the banner. And what we've seen, like I was saying before, is that's the first place people look, is the headline in the headline space. And we did this crazy study where like we took the same words that were in a banner ad and just put them as a headline below it, and people were way more likely to like have remembered the message of that ad when it's just written out in a headline, because we've heard of banner blindness. It doesn't mean that we don't see banners, just means we see them peripherally, and we see like the Geico blue or the gecko, but you don't see actually the message behind it until you actually read those words. So there's little things that we're trying to make it easier for any ad buyer without adding steps to the way you launch campaigns, to just generally improve the performance of any ad. And so I guess that's the preconceived notion that we're trying to fix too, is that like ads can perform better if you do these little enhancements that help kind of fit in with consumer, that and now there's a way to do that without adding extra time and steps to the way that you buy ads. We're trying to make it as simple as checking Sharethrough off on your SSP list. And
I mean, it's about being more relevant keyword here, right?
Exactly.
But okay, cool. Let's move into our closing segment, where I like to ask a couple questions. And the first question I'm going to ask is, what is your definition of greatness?
That's a great question. Definition of greatness.
Yeah.
I'm going to break that down, because I think
you're ready.
Greatness is it's almost like the eye of the beholder, right? I think great can be different for every person. And I think especially now as everyone's struggling with something in their lives right now. And I think everyone's looking for any mini win that they can get. And I think if you can set even little goals for yourself to actually help you feel great, I think is a big step that a lot of people should, kind of bring internally and think about that for themselves. Because, greatness can be, something grand, like going into space or, inventing something new, but greatness can also be like, setting a personal goal for yourself, and actually achieving it. Whether it's like something simple, like a workout goal, like once a week, like start small, like I'm setting this goal for myself and I feel great if I can actually achieve that. But I think that's how I kind of think about greatness. Especially, I think you and I were both talking. Having kids during a pandemic is no joke. So you look for any mini win you can get. Like even getting them to eat their dinner one night is just I felt great. They actually ate their dinner.
Go sleep. You'll regret this. You want naps. Oh man, that's great. That's great. Yeah. The greatness.
That's how I'm thinking about greatness these days, at least. Not thinking too great, but thinking great for what's great for yourself.
I love it. So your definition of great is from an individualistic self-awareness perspective. I like that.
Yeah.
How often do you focus on self-development and training, whether it's personal or professional?
Actually, a lot. That's a big thing that we've always tried to have, both internally at Sharethrough, training for our greater teams. We went through a huge transition 5 or 6 years ago from all of our business being managed service to all of it being programmatic. And we did a lot of internal training for everyone to feel confident about like not just the like acronyms and words that go into programmatic, but probably a lot of the things that I assume that you talk about. And there's a lot to learn in the programmatic space. There's so many little minutia things to learn, and it's constantly evolving. So I think it's really important to have a constant education plan for your internal teams to stay abreast of like what is happening and what's changing in our space. I think it's probably true for most industries, but I think especially in the programmatic space, it's just like it's a whirlwind every day, and it's hard to keep up with it. So you can make your team more confident in the work that they do by adding that type of education.
I love that. Well, I am a programmatic media trainer and coach. That's why I'm asking this question, because I'm always curious, like, oh, how important is training to you and your team? And the fact that you just added, making them more confident just by adding some internal training takes them a long way. And sometimes it's that easy. It's just having that confidence to be open to transformation and implementation. Mm-hmm. So I loved what you said. So last question, I promise. Let's play a game called What If. And the What If game is going to be focused on positive dreams and greatness, like beyond greatness. So an example of what if statement. So you can just share one or two statement if you want. But an example of my what if statement is, what if I retire my mom by summer 2022? That means she won't have to work unless she wants to. All her bills are paid. I'm far from it, but it's like a crazy dream. Like it's a crazy, what if this actually happened? And it's just to focus on the fact that our biggest limitation is our own mind. And so let's play a game with you. What is the what if statement? And it has to be big. It has to be huge, huge.
Oh, man. I mean, I guess what's really top of mind for me right now is like, what if we can somehow get out of this pandemic and go back to, being able to travel and not have to take a test to see our family. And that's the big what if I'm hoping for now. I'm hoping we can get now the big race is getting people even just booster shots, let alone just vaccinations. But I feel like we're going backwards again, and it's so frustrating. So my big what if, like we've already been canceling plans for beginning of next year, is like, what if we can actually get out of this? And especially us that have unvaccinated kids that can't go out as much, like what if we can actually go back to a world where we can regularly see our coworkers in person, where we can travel like we used to, where we can go back to doing some of the things that we used to do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my big hope and what if that I'm hoping for right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, what would be like a quick, easy email or way to contact you?
Yeah, my email's pretty easy. It's just frank@sharethrough.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Frank, for dropping by. We appreciate you. We thank you for taking the time to come educate us on consumption, like video consumption and behaviors from a consumer perspective. And this is recording in December, but it'll go live in January. So happy holidays and happy new year to you and your family.
Thank you. You too. Thanks so much for the time.